Vibragenix.
Vibragenix.
And Vibragenix.com.
I am addicted.
There's nothing like it.
Your patients will thank you for it. You will see healing in your practice like never before.
Well, my logical mind told me that if we are frequency and an energy system, why aren't we using that as the medicine to treat people? All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Caroline. I'm the founder and CEO of Vibragenix, and I'm super excited today to have Dr. Patrick Porter with me. Most people know him by being the inventor and founder of Braintap. They think there's a lot of other things you've done, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about you. I also was super excited. I bought a book called Wake Up Miracles, and I read what you wrote. And it really inspired and touched me. And that's part of what led me to do this today, is I've always believed that we are the sum total of all our greatest experiences and our greatest influencers. And you had a profound experience, I feel, that made you who you are today. So if you would love to share that, I would love to hear it.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people have heard that story just in private. I've never really published it over the years because some people might look at it and say, that's pretty weird. You know, I was brought up Catholic, so if the Pope didn't say it, we didn't believe it. You know, that was our family. I mean, I'm really supportive of the Catholic Church because they really helped our family out. My dad was a chronic alcoholic, and the Knights of Columbus would bring food. So we've always been real supporters of like the Knights of Columbus and things like that. So when I got injured, I was taking a job during school, and I worked for a plating company. And during one of the times, and I worked second shift, you know, and so I was working on a pump called a metering pump in the waste treatment part of the plant. And when I went to put the cover on it, the electrician threw the power on, and I breathed in all of these things, these bisulfites and things that would drop metal out of solution, and they're not healthy. You're not even supposed to be around them. So basically, I got chemical pneumonia, and I could barely breathe. I barely made it outdoors. I was out of work for a couple of weeks, and it just kept getting worse. I mean, I was getting worse and worse and worse until finally they hospitalized me, and they just kept getting worse. If you'd have seen me, I could not talk. I could think in my head, but I couldn't get my body to do it. I couldn't really get my body to respond, and I was a vegetarian at the time, so I went to a Seventh-day Adventist hospital, and they were feeding me all vegetarian food, and I was detoxing. And somebody said later that was probably the worst thing I could do because I was like, dumping all these toxins into my system, but I didn't know what else to do. And my sister came by, my dad being a Silva instructor in the Silva method, which was approved by the church, which was kind of bizarre because they taught you how to read energy around people. They also taught you to see guides, which we all have guides and teachers around us. And my sister told me that she was going to send her guides to heal me. And that night, and I couldn't hardly walk. I mean, if you saw me, it was like I had Parkinson's. I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And the next morning, they were going to do a full blood transfusion on me because something was in my bloodstream, but they couldn't get it out. It wouldn't filter out. And so that night, I went to bed, and another weird thing that was happening to me was I could only sleep for exactly 18 minutes. And I did that for about a week, which, if you know, that's really bad if you're not sleeping. You know, you can have some pretty bizarre experiences. But so I was laying down trying to sleep, and all of a sudden my room filled with light. I mean, the whole room, like a floodlight entered into the room, and it was so bright that I couldn't make it out. And then it kind of coalesced into a being of light, a big being, like I would say 7 or 8 feet tall. And all I heard in my head was go to sleep. And I had what would be called sleep paralysis. I could not move. And I don't know how long I was there, but I felt like I was just like trapped. And I kind of got a little afraid because I didn't know what this was. And even though with the training my dad had given me, I heard about this, but I never had a direct experience, anything like this. So when the being left the room after it was done, I jumped out of bed and not realizing that I had jumped out of bed and ran to the phone. And the phones, this was back in the 80s, in like
Yeah.
84. So there were no phones in the room, and no cell phones. And I called my sister and I said, Shelly, whoever you sent to see me, they scared the hell out of me. And she said, Patrick, you're talking. And I said, I am. She goes, how do you feel? I said, I feel good. And she goes, well, what did they say? And I said, all I heard in my head was go to sleep. She says, why don't you go back in and go to sleep? And I said, well, I've been trying to sleep, but I haven't. She said, just go back in, close your eyes and go to sleep. Well, the next morning I went back into my hotel, into the room there, into the hospital room, laid down, closed my eyes, and they woke me up about 10:30 the next morning. I'd slept the whole night, which hadn't happened
Wow.
in weeks. And they pulled the blood because they were going to do this blood transfusion. They came in, they pulled the blood a second time. And then the doctor and a whole bunch of other people came into the room and they said, we don't know what happened to you, but there's nothing in your bloodstream. So we want to run some other tests. They kept me in the hospital for almost 2 months doing tests on me to find out how they healed me. At one time, they told me that I was too happy. But I was happy because I felt like I got a new lease on life, and they tried to put me on. This was before they knew anything about lithium. I didn't know what lithium was. They told me they were going to give me lithium that was going to balance my moods. That obviously I just needed a night's sleep. That's what they figured. I didn't tell them that a being came into my room because I didn't know what was going to happen there. And
Yeah.
but I never took the lithium because I'm not a big drug taker, and I wasn't going to take something. When I read the research, my brother brought me, they didn't know what the long-term effect of lithium was. But what I did was I would meditate with the lithium in my hand. And of course, they put it in my mouth because they thought I was 24 years old, but they thought like I needed to be spoon fed. And but when they left, I just took it out of my hand. I meditated with it. I said, whatever this lithium is supposed to be doing for my body can do it through meditation. So about 2 weeks into it, they said, we've balanced out your lithium levels. I never took it. But
Wow.
they told me, we balanced out your lithium level. This is the level of lithium you're going to have to take the rest of your life. We're going to monitor you. And they kept monitoring me, and I had to go to counseling sessions and everything because they're still
Right.
trying to figure out what happened. And then as long as I agreed not to go back to work at the plating company, they told me that I could be off work for a year to heal because they couldn't figure out what was wrong. So I moved to Phoenix right away and just got a job because I knew whatever was going on in Michigan. I didn't realize they were probably afraid I was going to sue the company, which I did. I never even thought about that. I just wanted to get well. But then I went on a quest to find out what healed me. What was this? And I still don't know exactly who it was or what it was. I believe it was either my higher self, my guardian angels, God, something greater than me. And
Yeah.
and I think that my mother, who read a book by someone they call them walk-ins apparently, she thought I was another person because after this happened, I sold my house, got rid of, I was a nice guy, but I was more of a guy's guy. I wasn't like I am today. I was 24 years old going to college. So you can imagine, I ran a house with 7 guys living there. So, and immediately I told everybody they had to move out. I put the house up for sale. I moved it, and I went and I studied with Yogi Bhajan and Paramahansa Yogananda because I was trying to figure out what this was. So for 5 years, I studied, and I still don't know exactly, but I've had a lot of other experiences very similar to that through meditation, through breath work, especially the Kundalini breath work, where you're doing the yoga and you're unlocking your body senses. And I've had some pretty mystical experiences. I wrote a book that actually hasn't been published yet called Shamanism in the 21st Century. And it's all about now it's even more appropriate because people are using psychedelics everywhere, to get these kind of experiences. This was done with nothing more than laying there. I wasn't planning on it, so I'm not sure what it is. But every once in a while, all I have to do is, if I tune back into that time, I can get an energy surge through my body. It's like I'm still plugged into that time period. And like the hair will stand up on my arms and everything, because
Wow.
whenever I kind of think what came to me through meditation was that I think I had a soul emergence. Like we all have a mission on earth. I think we're all born with like our high level mission. And I was definitely not living it before that happened. You know, I was going to school for electronics. You know, I wasn't going to
Oh.
school for psychology. And I was learning about robots and how to they weren't even robots like we would think were fun now. They were solenoids, and you know, it was totally different than what we would think of robots. But they called them robotics. But I think that, you know, God had bigger plans for me and told me to
For
wake up.
sure.
You know, that's why it worked out with the book when Stephen Eve asked me to do the wake up book. I said, "Yeah, I got a story for you." You know,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
No, I thought that was fantastic. I knew there was something special that set you on this path, because what you created through your brain tap, you affect the masses. And I think that is just phenomenal what you've done. So I was very curious about how you got to where you are, and that story just, wow. I thought people need to hear that. It's phenomenal.
But I do believe too, like when I do a lot of TM meditation now with from the Maharishi and that, and I've actually visited his place in India and all of that. I've traveled all over the world trying to figure this out. And when he gave me the meditation that you do, and then you do these cities, you can get into the super state. And he believed that if we could get enough people meditating, he calls it the power of X squared. And if we get enough people in that same vibration, we can affect the earth. And he did these studies where he showed that prayer actually changes. He did it over 40 times. And each time he proved, like he did one in Washington, D.C., where they took a group of meditators and they would do the TM mantra, their own, everybody has their own, but you're visualizing peace for DC. And in our write-up they did about it, you can look at it online, called the Maharishi effect. And he basically, they said, there's no way we can lower that amount of crime. It would take a snowstorm of a magnitude that we've never seen. And they proved that while they're meditating for the time they did, and they meditated around the clock. So during that meditation, they brought the crime rate down significantly. I mean, and then when they stopped, it went right back up. And they've done that in prisons. They did it in towns. So my goal is there's also a guy named Danon Brinkley. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He wrote a book called Saved by the Light. And the reason that attracted me was he basically, I got really into these near-death experiences where you see the light.
Yeah.
I didn't see a light like that, but I identify with that. Like I felt like I was on a path to die, but I wasn't. Nobody told me I was going to die. But what he talks about in that book, when I met him at a conference in California years ago, he was told to put together clinics where people could come and use light, sound, and vibration to relax. He never did it. Still has never done it. I said, Danon, I'm doing that. I said, when I got back from this, had this experience, when I got back, I had to do what I'm doing. And, you know, even I call them God winks, you know, when you don't know you're on the right path, but you are. The other story that I put in one of Stephen's books, and it's a little bit in my book, Awaken the Genius, but I don't tell the backstory. I was working with a guy who's a mentalist in Vegas. His name is Gil Gilly. This guy was brought up by a guy named Ernest Holmes, who started the Church of Religious Science. And so it's all positive thinking, and you know, it's not the negative kind of Christianity. It's a positive form. But he was born with the ability to read your mind. And I've seen him do it thousands of times. And I would work for him at his church. I was one of the counselors there when I got a little old, you know, when I went to Phoenix. And I told him, you know, when you're a psychologist, and I was only an MS at the time. So, you know, people would pay me $10 or $15. You know, that was it. They didn't have any more money, you know, so you're not going to make a lot of money. And I said, Gilly, I said, I love what I do and I like helping you, but I got to make more money. He said, Patrick, you've got to go to Vegas. You're going to meet somebody there. Her name is Linnea, and you're going to figure out their technology. You're going to take it all over the world. And I said, I don't have any money to go to Vegas. He said, I'm going to give you money for gas to get to Vegas. You're going to stay in my room at the Sahara. You're going to meet her between events at this conference. He got me in. I just pretended I was him because he had a room there all the time. So I was Gilly, and I had my little black card that was his card to get in and out of the room. They brought me my food, and I was living this high life, no money. And I'm walking between the conference events, and this woman stops me and she says, I want to show you this technology. And I said, I'll come back, at the next break. She says, okay, my name's Linnea. The same name he told me. I said,
Wow.
okay, I need to go see whatever I was going to go do. That is important. So I get on this equipment, and it was about the size of a toaster oven. And it had woodworking goggles that had lights in them, and you wore headphones. And you had to manually do it. So you were looking at respiration, skin temperature, basically biofeedback technology. And you were looking at this thing. So I do the session, and I swear, just like we're talking right here, I was flying through space. Like, I'd never done that before. I mean, I just had this kind of out of body kind of experience. And I was actually, because I really like sci-fi, so I'm on this spaceship and I'm flying through space, and I'm thinking, this is really cool. My imagination's going crazy. And I think it's just boom, boom, 2 seconds. She's waking me up and she says, you got to get up. It's been 45 minutes. And I said, wow. I said, that blew my mind. I said, I want one of those. How much is that? She says, they're only $10,000. Well, I'm going, okay, well, might as well have been $10 million, right? So I'm going back to this event, to their booth throughout the event, probably 3 or 4 times, and never had that same experience, but it was still relaxing, and I knew about meditation and that. But that one blew my mind. And then I go back at the very end, and they're all crying and they're packing up, and I go, the event didn't go too well. And she goes, no, Dr. Robertson, the guy who invented this technology, died, and he didn't leave anybody any information about the technology. And I go, my background's electronics. I might be able to help you here. I said, I could take a look at it. I said, where are you going next? They go, well, we're going to go to Sedona because we don't know what else to do. We have 2 of these machines to sell, and we don't know what to do. And she said, then we're going to end up in Scottsdale. And I said, well, I have an office in Scottsdale. Why don't you come see me? So this was before cell phones, right? So we write down our numbers on pieces of paper. We exchange them. And I get back to Phoenix, and I lost their number.
Oh, no.
2 weeks later, a friend of mine, Jerry DeShazo, who became my first publisher, he calls me up. He says, Patrick, I met these people. As soon as I got done talking to him, I said, you got to meet them. He said, are you going to be at your office today? I said, yeah. I didn't put the 2 together. So I'm watching them get out of their car. It's the people that I met in Vegas. They got their machine. They're walking into my office, and the rest is history. I mean, and so I helped them to create the first. We never build that machine because what he had built wasn't what could be available. I saw what could be, and we built the machine from, but that's where it came from. But I was ready to give up on this whole profession and just go back to school. But people are put in your way, these mentors and people like that. And when God wants you to do something, and I can't tell you how many times in the history, like I sold my business in 2002, thought I was done, that I was just going to live off the royalties and do my thing. That business only lasted 12 years after I sold it. So I got all the technology back, and then I reinvented it again. I said, what could I do given I had money then? I never had been in business where I actually had money to start, so I had the money to actually, because I don't have any drug problems and things. So I had the money that, that I made. And I said, I was in Silicon Valley. I hired the engineers at the time, because what I learned in the 80s, the electronics was nothing like it is now. So I got a group together. We put together the new Braintap, and basically I got the technology. I put it all, it used to be like a stereo, like little components. So now it's all right in the headset. And, we're even miniaturizing it. When we're working on a few different things in the lab right now that are just lab, like a sleep mask, and being able to actually monitor EEG while you're wearing it. We have those in our lab. And eventually those will translate into products for the general public. So we'll be able to do neurofeedback with Braintap.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. So one thing that I'm trying to cover, since it's the beginning of a new year, is getting back to thriving. And to me, you know, the last 3 years, there's just been so much crap that people have had to deal with, either financially through their business or loss of a loved one or being really sick. And so there's been a lot of trauma. And I want to somehow help people release all of that. You know, I've said many times, if you're in meditation, you know, maybe you need to visualize a mirror behind you so you don't keep looking back there, because that's where all your energy goes, is where your focus is. And then you only see the present and the future. But somehow release all that, then rejuvenate and regenerate the body so that we can actually hit the reset button and actually start to thrive. Because I really honestly feel like as long as you've got all of that stuff that's taking your energy back here, it's like you're dragging a chair along behind you and you can never pick up any momentum. So I would love to hear your thoughts, your tips, anything on that whole concept to help people.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, in my Awaken the Genius book, I have a chapter called The Dragons of the Past, because people keep dragging them on and dragging them on and dragging them on. So I use it kind of as a wordplay, you know, because they, you know, and they wear it on their chest like, hey, look at this, look at me, poor me. This is what my past was. Yeah, but there's a saying that I think everyone needs to understand, and why we use your device here in our lab and with everybody that comes through, because the issues are in the tissues. Think of your body like a hard drive. It's storing, categorizing, and organizing your past experiences. And if they're not dealt with, they show up as pain and discomfort. As soon as you clear them, when you have flow, we're designed to be in flow, not in isolated periods of time. You know, the rishis actually would tell you that the next moment, you only need to know your next breath, because in the next breath is the next piece of information you need, because in that breath is something called pranic energy. And that energy actually stimulates the thought process. And we know that's true in science. So we have this breath and this breathing, but the problem is when you're locked up, when your body is locked because of fear, think of every negative emotional state. One thing's in common: they're not breathing, their body is not in flow, the cells are in cell danger response. We need to liberate those cells so they can communicate. And what most people don't realize, when we think about light, sound, and vibration, our sun is literally sending us information every second of every minute of every hour of the day. Just to put in perspective for the listeners, if you don't get to bed by 10 o'clock, you don't make as much melatonin. Melatonin is made between 10 and 12, twice as much. Your liver starts to clean at 11 o'clock. Now, how does your liver know it's 11 o'clock? It doesn't. It's the light of our sun that's broadcasting. Now, our mitochondria, which everybody pretty much in the health world knows, that's the key nowadays, right? Because our mitochondria seems to be being attacked. And so when our mitochondria is like a little sun, in what it's doing is it's broadcasting light energy to the cells around it. But think of our sun, if you took our sun and diminished its power by 50%, we would be dead. This planet would not be around. So when the cells in our body don't have enough energy, because we're not broadcasting that, because the cells, when you're in stress, they close up. Just like a baby would go into the fetal position, those cells go into cell danger response. When you're on the Vibragenix and you start to vibrate and stimulate and team with energy, now you're unlocking that code, and the body will have to release it, because while you're vibrating, it can't hold on to it. It's almost like a kid. For those that have had children or grandchildren, you know, when they come running to you and they're angry and you go, just breathe, and they get angrier. But if you just stop and breathe with them, as soon as they breathe, their anger goes away, because they can only be angry while they're not breathing. The cells can only be in a cell danger response when they're not there. So we need ways to release that. And I tell people it's a physiological. We don't have a mental health problem in the world today. We have a physiological problem in the world today. when we think about one of the things in neuroscience that we learned just recently is when you sit down for 2 hours without moving, you're just working on your computer, playing a computer game,
Right.
watching TV, 10% less oxygen to your brain. So if you have 10% less oxygen, that's going to affect every cell of your body because your brain gets the first cut of everything. So if it's not getting oxygen, and our cells are designed to share energy. Our body is designed to share energy across the whole biological system. But when we start having, they call them crystallizations actually, where we have these isolated problems in the body that need to be released and we'll feel pain. But in a physiological level, it might be trapped plasma proteins or however you want to think about that. There's a lot of reasons for that. But that's a physical manifestation of a energy problem. It's all energy. Everything about us is energy. So if we get, so if we get the energy going, so what I tell people is, think of your past. Let's imagine that Carolyn, you and I were at dinner and we were having such a great conversation. We forgot to eat all our food. So we got it to go, right? So we get it to go, but we forget to write down the date or what it was, and we put it in our refrigerator. And when we put it in the refrigerator, it just keeps getting pushed back further and further into the refrigerator until finally we forget about it. And then somebody's going to come over, but something's stinking in your refrigerator. You don't really know what it is, but it's not so bad yet. But somebody's coming over and they might open up your refrigerator and something's stinking in there. So you finally get in there, it's trash day or whatever. You're going to dump it all. You get back to this white box that's from a to-go. You open it up and it's green and fuzzy. This is your past. What do you do with it?
Throw it away.
You throw it away. You don't send it off to CSI to find out if mom and dad were responsible for putting the garbage into the little box. Well, that's where forgiveness comes in. And basically, the biggest person we need to forgive is not somebody external from us. It's us.
Yes.
Because, when I was working with a woman once in New York City, I was doing a demonstration for a group of psychologists. And I wanted to show them we can clear these kind of memories through NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And I'm doing this demonstration. This woman, she looked like, and a lot of people in New York were all black, she looked like she was going to a funeral, wearing all black. And she wasn't very old, but she looked like a frumpy old person. And she had told me that 4 years before that, if I'd have known her, she was vibrant. She ran every night. She ran at 11 o'clock at night through Central Park. I'm thinking, you said, who ran with you? Well, I ran by myself. I'm going, well, I don't think I'd run through Central Park at 11 o'clock at night. And I got a black belt in Taekwondo. So I said, okay, well, she was raped. And in her mind, she crystallized it right here. Every time she looked up, so she wouldn't look up. Now, physiologically, if you don't look up, you're going to be in a physiological state of depression.
Right.
Because you can't roll your shoulders back and look up and feel depressed. That's impossible. That's a physical. So it's like an antenna. So I said, she didn't want to forgive these people. I said, you don't have to forgive them. Let's forgive you because unfortunately, you've been replaying this in your mind since the day it happened. It happened once in reality, but it's happened every day since because you keep playing the movie. I said, would you be willing to put it behind you now? And so we did the little exercise, which is basically make it black and white, put it behind you. And like you said, a mirror, we say, put it in a picture frame. What did you learn from it? Well, what she learned was don't run at 11 o'clock at night. I said, why don't you get up early in the morning when everybody else is running and do it at that time? And I said, let's fake it till you make it. This was a 3-day workshop. And I said, what is going to be the cue that tells you that you've released this memory? She says, well, I'm going to get my clothes back out that I love to wear, my colorful, bright clothes. She didn't want to be noticed, right? She didn't want anybody to notice. So she was basically hiding that this happened. Well, the next day she came to the seminar. This was a different person by removing that one key event because she said, I'm still not ready to forgive them, but I'm willing to forgive myself for carrying it with me. I said, they could never find them. They were not going to find them. There's no way she was going to get even. So, and that happens to a lot of people, and a lot of times we don't even know what the stuff is. It could have been something that happened when you were in vitro. I mean, as
Right.
bizarre as some religions are, like the one that Tom Cruise is part of, the what's the name of that
Scientology.
one? Yeah,
The
Scientology.
Scientology.
They,
Yeah.
yeah. So they believe that most everything happened to you while you were in vitro. So you got to go back
wow.
and clear that. There are people, I mean, there are studies now that show if you clear your ancestors even, and they did this in Indian cultures. I mean, this is
Wow.
something ancient did all the time. So you're carrying right now, it might even be your stuff. You're carrying all
Right.
the stuff mom and dad had at the moment you were conceived, and everything their mom and dad had at the moment they were conceived, and their mom and dad had at the moment they were conceived. And in the Hopi tribe, they say 7 generations, and it just so happens that our geneticists say 7 generations. So how do the ancient traditions know that? So it's like some of this stuff might not even be us,
Right.
but if you take ownership of it. So what happens is we get triggered experiences, right? We get triggered like there's a stressful event that happens around the world. One of the things I recommend people do is don't get your news from national television, because
Yeah.
if every other commercial is a drug company, that's not news. What they're doing
That's
is their propaganda. There's a difference. News comes from sources that actually report on the news, not make the news.
Right.
There's a big difference. And they have to scour the whole planet to get us an hour of bad news every night. You should join groups in your city that give you good news, like join some clubs and join
Right.
some groups and start filling we need to, one thing, just going back to we are light and why we need to get this cellular system released. They did a study during COVID where every cell, I remember I said it's like miniature suns. We can actually measure your mitochondria release in light. That's your metabolism. You absorb light and you transmit light. That's that's the mitochondria doing its job. And so those people that are pessimist have 200 times less light that they broadcast than an optimist. So
Wow.
anytime that there's a book from a long time ago that said you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought, and I do believe that's true, that we are going to have them because we're programmed to survive. Everyone listening to this, you survived. Our genetic stuff made it, but that doesn't mean we didn't have a lot of close calls. We didn't lose a lot of people along the way, and it's not only just the military that has PTSD. Almost every person does. And what happened to us during these 3 years, like you're talking about, is it was pretty sad. They were scaring the heck out of everybody. They were pitting families against families, people against people, and even our basic rights of reading, they were restricting. So I mean, when you think about what's happening and people get afraid of that, and then it's almost like the moment we realize there's no Santa Claus, we realize there's no Santa Claus, our government really doesn't care about us.
Right.
Really, when people go, why would the government do that? I go, you think it's the government doing this? I'm like, and I'm not, I mean, I think we live in the best country in the world, but unfortunately we've got some psychopaths running it.
We do.
We gotta get, they're supposed to be making sure that our inalienable rights don't get taken, not take our inalienable rights. So
exactly. I think that's
why
this
when you're talking about, so when you think about what do we need to do, one thing they can't take from you is your internal dialogue. So what are you saying to yourself every day? Don't give people the power to invade your personal space. You have 6 inches between your ears that you control, you have dominion over. In one experiment I do with clients when I had an active client list, now I just mostly work with doctors and do seminars, but I would ask them, one of the questions I'd ask them on the very first meeting is, you and I were at the top of a mountain and we look down and it's thousands of feet below us and we jump. What happens? And if they go, oh, we fall. I go, no, we sprout wings and we fly. This is your imagination. There are no limits there. So people limit their imagination
Right.
just in the simplest things, like something called the psychoimmune system. Our psychology affects our immune system.
Is that
So
what's
if
going
you
on?
have a thing, yeah,
I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a bigger wave in illness. And I know that fear and anger open the doorways to the darkness, but it seems like people that were thriving before, they were professional, they had healing practices, they did all kinds of things. Their health is not recovering. So it's that internal dialogue is what you're saying?
right. You've got to take time every day to, like, the best example I give, I went to India and had a chance to speak in front of Daji's group. He's a guru there over there, and he had 75,000 people there. And they do something called the heartfelt meditation. And Dr. Vivek Sharma and I went there with our NeuroCheck technology, and we wanted to measure. They wanted to see what was the effects on somebody, because what you do is, let's say that we were going to pray for you. So we would sit around you and we would visualize our heart beaming energy to you to heal you. It's like a prayer circle, right? But it's an
Right.
Indian version of a prayer circle. So,
Right.
but we hooked up the sender and we hooked up the receiver. Guess who got the most energy?
The sender.
The sender.
Yeah.
So when you give it away, you get more. That blew their minds when I did it. So when you're serving other people, if you feel like, that's why you hear about these doctors that go into these plague zones, they never get sick. Because
Right.
they're so busy helping everybody else, they don't think about getting sick. They think
I like
about
that.
healing.
I like
So
that a lot.
if you think about, so what I do every morning and every night, and I visualize the Braintap network. We have 120,000 users out there in the world. And I visualize tapping into that network, like the mycelial network, like mushrooms or something, but I'm
Right.
sending energy on the grid. And I'm
Oh,
visualizing
wow.
them adding energy to the grid. And that we're changing the frequency of the planet, because we are. Every time you offload your stress, you don't carry it around with you, and you meet another person out of joy and peace and love, there's a transmission that happens there. In fact, they now know, just like the sun beaming information to our biological system, our cells are beaming information, but they also know that 99% of who we are, you and I, changes every 40 seconds based on that information exchange called biophotic exchange. So if you probably heard the story from your parents when you were younger, if you hang around so-and-so, you're going to be like birds of a feather flock together, right?
Talk together.
Well, they now know that's true. That's true, because when you're in the field of energy around somebody, our National Institute of Health in the United States actually has now said we have a biosphere. We have an energy sphere around us.
Yes.
I mean, that blew my mind. It's like, so they now know we have this energy field and it's magnetic. So when, like in my field, I have to put things on the brain to measure the brain because it's electrical. It's not very powerful. We have to put them right on the brain to get those. But our heart is magnetic and it broadcasts a field of energy around us. So that's where they were getting that 200 times more light energy. So when you think about your light energy and who you are, when you're around like-minded people, that's why when you go to events and you meet people that are like you and you go to have dinner with them and you come back home and you're so energized, and then, but unfortunately, some people, they're still in their own little area. They don't get out. They don't realize that there is another group out there and it's also non-locale, which means they now know, our government actually said our mind is not located in our body. So when these used to be metaphysical concepts, they're now a scientific fact. We can do remote viewing. It's been proven. So who we are is not registered. We are energy. When we die, 75 grams leaves our body, but nothing changed. What is that 75 grams? That's the energy. That's who we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're spirit or we're energy or whatever, when they say in the Bible that all spirits were created at the same time, it goes back to the law of thermodynamics. Energy is never created nor destroyed. It's just transformed. So here we are. But these people that don't, they're not thriving because they're looking in the wrong direction. Whatever you're doing, if we can each help one person today, and that one person goes out and helps another person, if that really kept going, in a year, the whole world would be changed. But what happens is somewhere along the way, something negative happens, they get disrupted, they stop believing. You know, when there's a really good book out there, I think everybody should read. It's called Suggestible You. And this guy, he was Church of Religious Science, and he wrote this book. And what he did was he showed that the placebo effect is now 40%. Now, the sad part is that the supplement, not the supplement companies, but the drug companies, there's a gene that certain people have. And if you have that gene, you're what we call placebo positive. They can screen for that now and get rid of them. So they can have any drug they want pass.
Oh, wow.
So, but 40% of the time, anything will work. So when you think about like my field, there's never been a study better than 12%, which means they must be talking them out of the change.
Right.
So it's not about talking about your problem. That's why I say take the leftovers, forgive whoever was a part of it, especially yourself, move on. And whatever's happening right now, and this is something that I try to teach all my clients, whatever's happening right now is the lessons that you're supposed to be having so that you can get to the next level lesson. So it's just like a computer game. They're going to show up. It's not just Google that's listening. You know, whatever we talk about, we start getting ads from Google. Well, how many times have you talked about somebody and then they text you or they call you or they go, I was just thinking about you. Well, I was just thinking about you. Well, that's because we're non-locale. You know, we have, that's where the quantum physics part comes in. And I think that when people are suffering, if they could realize that the more they serve others, the more they're going to serve themselves, they'll do more.
Yeah.
You know, so when I think it was one of the motivational speakers, he's passed away now, but he used to say, if you want to get rich, find out how you can make 10 other people rich, and then you'll be rich too. You know, don't think about how you're going to get rich. You know, think about how you're going to help other people. And by doing that, and that's kind of been my philosophy the whole way. I sometimes should think more about money, I think, but I've never really had to worry about money. If it gets that bad, I focus on it. But money's always an issue because you're always growing or expanding, and you know, you're like me, you have inventory. So sometimes your inventory rich and cash poor, and cash rich and no inventory. You know, those kind of things that you play that game for a while. But it's a game. So you know when all the rishis would say this, life's a game, play it. So think of your life as a game. And compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, these give you secret powers that other people don't have. When you think about the negative emotional states, it's like you have to pay a tax. You literally pay a tax. Because when Buddha said, he who angers you conquers you, medical science has proven that true today. Because in order for you to have an angry, upset, negative thought about another person, your brain has to create the chemical corresponding solution to have that thought. And you're destroying yourself from the inside out. So that's why when Jesus said, hey, pray for your enemies, you know, you're healing yourself by doing that. So when I think about Biden, I just pray for him. You know, that's what we have to do. You know, the guy needs some help. You know, and other people, and it's like they're myopic. Right now, they're going for the greed or whatever's going on. I don't even know. It's like it's a sci-fi movie that nobody. If when I was growing up in the 80s, in the 70s, when I was in high school, and somebody was to tell me what just happened to us happened, I would have told them there is no way. I'm not going to go watch that movie. It would never happen in a million years. But here we are. And there's a really cool book called The Snapping. And that book talks about how occults snap people. It's the playbook that we just went through. Exactly.
Oh, yeah, I believe that. I have seen like what seems like the Stockholm syndrome in a lot of people. You know, we voluntarily locked ourselves in our houses, and you know, then people are given stipends, and then you appreciate the government. You're so thankful for being locked up. Thank you for locking me up. I really appreciate you. And it left people really paralyzed. You know, another problem I think that we have, and this just reminds me of something I haven't thought about in years. I was probably in my late 20s and I was maybe early 30s. And I was really frustrated with people, with their integrity. You know, I was doing ghostwriting and working in the supplement industry. And I was really frustrated. So I took 2 days off. I lived in Hood River. I went across the river to Kirsten Hot Springs. And I spent 2 days and did the hot springs, you know, all the different mineral baths and things like that. And then I go out and hike. And I came to this giant oak tree. It was just really, really old. And I sat down and I did a meditation. I asked this tree, what is wrong with people? And I believe that God can speak through anything, right? And I got really clear resistance. And I said, okay, explain that. And I said, this tree says, if I would have matted my leaves together and my branches, try and resist the elements of the wind and the rain and the hail and sleet and all of these other things, I would have been in pieces on the ground years ago. He said, but you humans, you resist everything, even love and joy sometimes, but everything else. And what happens when you resist is you contract your field, and that negative energy, I mean, you're already feeling it, right? It gets trapped inside of you. And he said, if you would, anytime you felt pain, anytime you felt fear, anything else, if you would open yourself up and just breathe, it would go right through your field. It'll hurt like heck for a minute and then it'll be gone. And I think I see this even with the state of affairs that things have gotten to. I mean, we see all the problems with the government or whatever else, and we still have that like resistance. And I'm wondering, how do you balance that? I guess you just breathe it through. There's some things we cannot control, but I think the important thing is not making yourself ill. And that's what I'm just seeing, chronic illness at a level I've never seen it before.
Right. Well, unfortunately, what we're seeing when because we with the neurocheck, we can get their meridians and the
Yes,
triple heater, the heart meridian,
yes,
and the pericardium. Those meridians are being clobbered by this virus, by everything that's
yes.
going on. It's going down, and it's like it's almost like they don't. That's why I was talking about the heart is the biggest brain, even though it's the smallest, 40,000 neutrino cells. It controls everything because it broadcasts the biggest signal. It's telling the body what to do. So that's why there's more heart attacks on Monday morning than any other day of the week. If your heart's not in your life, your heart disconnects, you're not here anymore. You know,
Right.
so you think about, and breathing is the key. You know, if we can get people to breathe, and especially think, you know, if we look at the world, when they did that study I was talking about, where they showed people who were pessimistic look at the world, you're going to see fault because there's a lot there's a lot of problems. But if you look at the world as an optimist, you're going to see a lot of great things too. So it's all in what you focus on. And I think when you're scared, you know, that's why they got to get you scared. And, you know, even when they diagnose somebody, they say, oh, you've got a diagnosis, you've got cancer or whatever. Okay, everybody has cancer. It's just they have white marker cells that kill it. So what do I need to do to increase my white marker cell and get in the right health condition so that that part of my body will love and appreciate and be another, you know, no, that's not the way they do it. Immediately they start, because they have the CYA effect, right? They want to make sure they don't get sued. So they're giving just bad information all the time. And because it's a crazy world we live in. But I think if we can instruct people, breathe through it, and it's okay to fail. We're taught that, you know, nowadays you don't even have to win anymore. Everybody gets a trophy. You know, it doesn't matter what you do, everybody wins. That's not the way the world works. In order for you to achieve, you know, when I look at when I was searching the world for what happened to me, and I was looking for systems, because I'm kind of a left brain kind of guy like that, right? So I first went and I said, you know, the Catholic Church has their saints, but they're not very many of them. And I said, now, Buddhism seems to be pretty interesting. So I went and looked at Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, and they chant, right? Namyo Renge-kyo, and, you know, Tanya Turner was part of that. And so I'm chanting one day, and I'm with this group, and they're evangelistic. I didn't know that. That turned me off right away. I mean, why would you want to do that? They want to get people into their Namyo Renge-kyo club. And so I'm chanting, and they go around the room. They say, what are you chanting for? I'm chanting for a car. I'm chanting for a relationship. And they come to me, I said, I can buy those things. I'm chanting for enlightenment. I'm chanting for, a glimpse of whatever's beyond. I said, why would you chant for earthly things when you can go earn them? So people got
Right.
their
Yeah.
misconceptions out there. And so I said, that's not for me. So I moved on. And actually, there's another little part of the story, but I won't tell it here. But I just thought, that's not the religion for me. But when I went and studied with Yogi Bhajan's group in Parajananda, they have a system, and it's mostly around breath and getting the body, the physiology working. Yoga.
Interesting.
And when we've measured people, and it doesn't even have to be yoga specifically, a lot of dancers, like professional dancers, ballroom dancers, they have incredible nervous systems. Not that they're all happy all the time, but those people are healthy. So that, to me, if you got to get your body moving and breathing. If you don't get your body moving and breathing, you can eat all the right foods, but if you're not moving and breathing, you're not going to be thinking the right thoughts, because your body it'll settle, and you'll start to basically, the energy of the foods you consume also kind of vibrates the thoughts that you think. When you're eating a lot of sugar
Right.
and junk food, you're thinking those junky thoughts. And so it's a whole combination of things. I just think, we're seeing it with certain people, because they don't understand that there is a war for our brains right now. People
I
are,
believe it.
they're becoming almost zombie-like. Like you said, when they can get us to turn on our own family for not wearing a face cover that's hurting us,
Yeah.
and when does it stop? And I think that if it happens again, I'm going to be really disappointed in the American people. So when you think about health, we have such an incredible immune system, but if it's not moving and breathing, I tell people, if you go by a pond that doesn't move, eventually it'll stagnate, it'll have algae, it'll grow lily pads. We want our body to be more like that river that's moving. And just like they say, our body is like a river, because every morning we step into it, it's a different body. Because at a rate of about 50 million cells per second, we're changing. And that's not even including the epigenetic exposure every 40 seconds. So, we're not the same, but like you said, people keep dragging their past into it. And I think the only thing we can do is be an example and say, what are you doing? Well, I would, like, if somebody was on the Vibragenix here and I said, try to be depressed, I don't think you could. You'd fall off, because
Right.
you couldn't be moved. It's like your body wouldn't be able to do that. So we have to unlock and give permission to ourselves to feel good. It used to be we had to have a reason to feel good. Somebody had to love us, or we had to get
Right.
some kind of award. But now we're realizing that this healthy feelings are our own. They're under our own jurisdiction. We get to choose if we feel happy or sad. The events don't get to choose anymore, unless you let them.
Also, I think it's important to set an intention at the beginning of every day to choose to be happy. Even though you wake up, you're not even awake yet, make that choice. And then happy things just happen to come into your life. I think that's really important. Choose to be healthy. The other trend I've really seen is with long haul COVID, people come out with another 6 diagnoses. And they focus on their diagnosis. And I'm always telling people to focus on your wellness, not your illness. Sure, it has to be addressed with whatever tools, but focus on your wellness every day, because whatever you focus on gets bigger. I want to put together a list of those books you recommended for our listeners. And do you have anything else to add? This has been amazing.
Well, I think the main thing is, if you work first on the energy of the body, the mitochondria, that's you got to eat well, obviously, move and breathe, and do some kind of brain fitness, then your epigenetics are going to be at the positive side. If you're not doing any one of those things, you're going to have a chance that you're going to be predisposed for the negative side of that gene expression. So
Right.
they don't even, they're diagnosing a different person. That's why, if you can work on the mitochondria, get the energy of the body up. We live in an energy economy, and it's called ATP for those who want to look it up. And that's the currency of the body. So let's increase that energy. And one of the best ways you can do that, and why we're even talking, is what you have, the Vibragenix. So we want to get those cells. Those cells want to be vibrating and teeming with energy. And once they have enough energy for themselves, they share with the cells around them. So, they don't hoard it. They don't go buy storage units. They basically share that energy. So, at first it's going to be difficult to get moving. But everyone probably knows somebody who started exercising in one form or another, and then that person became addicted to exercise because the neurological benefits are so great. You can't buy them. You can only do them. So, I think just get out there and start doing. And like you said, fake it till you make it, with the happiness, get up, smile, and, say, hey, today's a wonderful day to, explore who I am. You don't even know who you are until you wake up,
It's true. That's true. And fake it till you make it actually works. I knew someone that was very, very, very negative, and I don't know what changed in him, but he just decided that every day when he got up, he was going to be happy and happy to people around him. And he was going to, make his bed, start with simple things, but just smile and be happy. And like 2 months later, he just became that person. I saw him 2 months later. I was like, what happened to you? Because I made it just it's like, you're not at all the
right.
same person I used to know. Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been super fun for me.
All
Hopefully
right.
it will
Thank
be for my
you.
listeners too. It's incredible information. All right. Take care.